Hello everyone and welcome to another X-Plane 11 tutorial. In December of 2017, X-Plane 11.10 was released. It includes many new features such as joystick and keyboard profiles, art assets, and my absolute favorite, the Garmine G1000 Glass Cockpit. The G1000 takes many of the common instruments you're used to seeing in a small aircraft, but displays them on two big computer screens instead of the traditional steam gauges that we're all used to seeing. So I'll get you to pause the video, download the update, and resume when you're ready to go. Now that everyone's ready to go, you'll see two Cessna Skyhawks on the screen, the traditional steam gauge version and the G1000 edition. So we'll select the G1000, your favorite airport, and we'll start flying. We're sitting inside the Cessna Skyhawk G1000 or Glass Cockpit version. You'll notice that everything has been replaced by two big computer screens with the exception of three gauges below. We have airspeed, HSI, and altitude. And these are more for safety than anything else because all three of those gauges are available on these two screens as well. The screen on the left is called a primary flight display or PFD, and the screen on the right is called a multifunction display or MFD. And sandwiched between the two of them is something called an audio panel, and you'll see that here. Let's dive right in and have a look at the primary flight display. The first thing that I'll point your attention to is at the top left, and that's where you'll find the navigation frequency information. And you'll see highlighted by a cyan colored box or blue colored box is the standby frequency for Nav1, and it's set to 110.10. So if I want to move from the standby frequency of Nav1 to the standby frequency of Nav2, I simply click the middle button of the nav knob and away I go. I'm now highlighting the standby frequency for Nav2. So let's say I want to bounce back to Nav1, I simply click that middle button again and I'm back to Nav1. So now that I showed you how to switch between the two standby nav frequencies, I might as well go ahead and show you how to change them. So using the outer knob changes the frequency in megahertz, and the inner knob changes the frequency in kilohertz. So clockwise increases it, and counterclockwise decreases it. So if I wanted to change it to 109, I would use the large knob going in the counterclockwise direction. And let's say I want to go to 120, I'd use the inner knob or smaller knob going in the clockwise direction. So now I have 109.20. And to set that from standby to active, I'd simply click this toggle button here, or the two arrows, and you'll see it ported it over into the active position. Now I'm going to show you a little trick, because if you notice to the right of these frequencies, there's a bit of blank space. So usually that's an indication that there's a use here or there's something missing. So let's go ahead to Nav2 by clicking the middle button. There we go. And let's change the frequency to a local VOR 114.60. I happen to know that that's the YOW VOR here in Ottawa. So 114.60. And we'll hit the toggle button or double arrows to put it into the active position. Now you'll notice that that VOR that I just mentioned is sitting right beside the frequency. So instead of having to listen to the Morse code indicator, you can simply dial into a VOR, and if it's within range, you'll see the alphanumeric version of that nav aid come up right beside the frequency. Now you can still listen to the Morse code if you like, and you can do that by going over to this volume button and clicking it in the middle, and you'll see it'll change from these double arrows here to ID. So let's go ahead and do that. So now that it's set to ID in the background, you should start hearing the Morse code for YOW. And if you no longer want to hear that, again, simply click the volume button again and you'll go back to the double arrows. Same applies for Nav1. You can switch over here back to Nav1. If this was set to a corresponding VOR or NDB, you can simply click the volume again and listen to the Morse code. The top middle of the primary flight display is called the navigation status bar, and it displays information relating to your current flight plan or direct to information from the Garmin G1000 GPS. You can see things up here such as the next waypoint, distance to the next waypoint, and several other useful pieces of information. I won't go into major detail right now, but once we get up into the air, you'll start to see this information become real useful soon. On the right-hand side of the primary flight display is our communication frequency information, and you'll see highlighted with the cyan colored box is our COM1 standby frequency. You'll notice that it's opposite to the Nav1 standby frequency, so be aware that the cyan colored box means standby frequency, so the left-hand side is always the active frequency, or in this case, the right-hand side is always the active frequency. The same principles that I showed you earlier apply to communication frequency information. You can press the middle button of the COM to switch between COM1 and COM2, and you can use the outer knob for megahertz and the inner knob for kilohertz, and the double arrow to toggle between standby and active. So I won't spend much more time on that because I've already spent a lot on the navigation frequency information side. In order to explain the rest of the primary flight display, it would be beneficial for me to get in the air first. So we'll take off from the Rockcliffe Airport here in Ottawa, and then I'll demonstrate the rest of the features of the primary flight display. Alright, the first thing I want to point out to your attention is the middle left-hand side of the primary flight display, and that's the airspeed indicator. You'll notice here that I'm currently going about 71 knots right now. And you'll see that there's a green ticker tape bar over here, and that means that my airspeed is considered safe. Also, you'll notice if I was to accelerate here by pushing in the throttle, you'll notice a slight little blip here, or magenta line, and that shows me what the airspeed is anticipated to be in the next 6 seconds. So for example, if I was to do a slight pitch here down, you'll notice the magenta line going upwards, and also my airspeed going upwards, and eventually this yellow bar telling me that I'm going to hit an overspeed. So again, this is a ticker tape type gauge. It'll tell you your current airspeed, which I was around 70. I'm much faster now, so we'll correct that. The magenta bar, or purple bar, to the right-hand side shows you the anticipated airspeed in the next 6 seconds. And that green turns to a yellow when you're about to overspeed, and it'll turn to red when you are already at an overspeed position. Below the airspeed gauge is something called a true airspeed, and you can see here that currently I'm going about 80 knots, but according to the true airspeed, I'm going 82. So the true airspeed takes several things into consideration, such as your barometric pressure, temperature, and so on. So now we'll move to the middle of the primary flight display, and you'll see these yellow arrows. And this is my horizontal situation indicator. So as it pitches up towards the blue, I'm going higher in the sky, and as it pitches down towards the brown, I'm going more towards the ground. So let's say I want to go at 1,000 feet per minute in an altitude. I can pitch this up towards about 10 degrees here, and you can see here on the right, I'm going to be around 1,000 here once it levels off feet per minute. If I would like to make a turn, as I start to turn, you'll notice this arrow up here. This is my turn coordinator, and the line underneath it is the slip skid gauge. So if I use my right rudder pedal here, I'm now correcting the slip over here. So again, that's your turn coordinator, and underneath the skip/slid indicator. On the right hand side is another type of ticker tape gauge, and that's my altitude gauge. Here in the middle is my current altitude. I'm at 2,500 feet. Down below is the current barometric pressure, and usually in Ottawa and Canada and United States, that's at 18,000 feet is when you would adjust that. And here on the right is your vertical speed. So right now it says I'm going about 700 feet, 800 feet per minute in altitude. And if I was to pitch down here, say midway between the 10. Now I'll be going about negative 500 feet per minute. So you can get a gauge of your vertical speed here on the right, your current altitude here in the middle, and up top is my desired altitude. So I currently have it set to 3200. So if I want to set it to say 3500, I'll come down here to the altitude knob. The inner knob does hundreds of feet, so 3500. The outer knob does thousands of feet, so say 4500. So let's go ahead and set that to 3500. So now this is not going to actually do anything. It's simply going to give me an indication or warning that I'm at my desired altitude. When we get into autopilot features here in a minute, then I can go ahead and actually make some use of that. But all this is going to really do here is put this little blue bar telling me that when this blue bar comes down to the middle, I'm at my desired altitude. It won't actually level me off or anything like that. So now let's move to the bottom, and this is our course deviation indicator, and this will use Nav 1, Nav 2, or the GPS. So if I press the CDI soft key here at the bottom, now I'm on Nav 1, now I'm on Nav 2, and now I'm back to GPS. So this is useful if you need to switch between, we'll say, a GPS to get to the airport, and then a Nav 1 for your ILS localizer glide slope type approach. Below here we have our inset map, and you can turn this off by going to the inset button and then selecting off. I happen to like it on, so we'll go back to the inset button, which will turn it on. It is kind of cluttered, so if you do want to reduce some of the clutter, you can simply click on this declutter button up to 3 times, and it'll remove some of the clutter from your map. And to get back to the home row of soft keys, you simply go to the back button here. In addition to the inset soft key, we have several other soft keys down below. I won't go over them all, I'll save that for a future video, but I'll highlight a couple key important ones. If you're doing a DME approach, you can press the DME button, and again clear to get rid of those boxes. The transponder box here at the bottom will let you change between standby and on. You can also choose your codes, so we'll hit back. You also have an ident for your transponder. The TMR reference will let you do a timer and set some minimums. Usually in the full G1000 you can even specify a V1, V2 speed, but it doesn't seem that Laminar Research has implemented this yet, so we'll select clear. And the nearest button will show you the nearest airports. And if you want to scroll down, first make sure that this is highlighted, this blue bar here, that's called the cursor. And if you don't know what a cursor means or how to use the Garmin GNS 530, you might want to watch my previous video on using that. But long story short, click the middle button of the FMS, and that will turn this cursor on and off if you're on different screens. But for now, since it's already on, we'll just use the large outer knob, and we can rotate between the different airports. So as you can see here, I can see all the airports that are close to me. So for example, if I wanted to go to CYOW, which is about 14 nautical miles away, all I would have to do is click on this Direct To button. It tells me, are you sure you want to go to Ottawa? And I press enter and say yes. So now, if I would like to activate the autopilot, I can do my GPS towards Ottawa. So let's go ahead and do that. On the left-hand side of the primary flight display, you'll see our autopilot controls. And I want to show you one little thing. Notice on the plane, there's nothing here. The multifunction display has the autopilot controls here, but the primary flight display seems to be missing them. But whenever you click the pop-up version, they're here. So I think that's a little bug that Laminar Research has to fix in the next version. So hopefully they'll keep adding new features to the Garmin G1000 and fixing some of these features. So back to what I was talking about, we've went to the nearest, we selected CYOW, and we clicked the Direct To button and activated it. Now we'll go ahead and click the AP button for autopilot, and you can see at the top we're in roll mode with autopilot, and then we'll select nav. So now it'll automatically start turning towards the waypoint for YOW. So the next thing we'll do is I'd like to hold this altitude, so I'll simply click the altitude button, and now I can let go of the yoke, and it'll maintain my current 5,500 feet and start turning me towards the GPS. And if I move this out of the way and look at the multifunction display, you can see here the plane is coming around, and it'll line up with that magenta line very shortly. Looking at some more autopilot controls, let's say I would like to lower my altitude from the 5,500 feet down to 3,000 feet, or say 4,000 feet. I simply go here to the altitude knob, and the large knob does thousands of feet, so let's go to 4,500, and I'll go to the small knob, and we'll drop it to 4,000. So there's two ways for me to go from my current altitude down to 4,000. Technically three, I could do it manually. The two autopilot ways are vertical speed and flight level change. So the first thing I'll show you is vertical speed. So I'll select vertical speed, and then I can select the nose down button, and you can see now it's minus 100, and we'll get down to minus, say, 800. And you can see the ticker tape here bring me down to minus 800. So now I'm moving minus 800 feet per minute till I get to 4,000, and then it's going to level me off. But I want you to notice something. My speed's increasing. So I didn't touch my throttle, and now I'm really close over here to an overspeed, or getting close to overspeed, which is not a good thing. So I'm going to do some things that maybe I shouldn't do in a real plane, because I'm trying to demonstrate what not to do, essentially. So let's nose down a little more to say 1,200 feet per minute. And you can see I'm getting into overspeed territory, but the plane doesn't care. So it doesn't care, it doesn't try to adjust my speed. It's just doing exactly what I said. Get me down to 4,000 feet at a rate of 1,200 feet per minute. So when we get down to 4,000 feet here, we'll level off automatically. So I'll show you that. And I'm disregarding all these warnings over here of overspeeding, because I want to show you what a flight level change does next. So very soon we'll be leveling off at 4,000, and then the speed should go back to normal again. And all the while we're still heading towards our GPS waypoint of YOW, and you can see at the top we're going to YOW. We're 13 nautical miles away at a heading of 197. And there we go, we reached our 4,000 feet. The plane's starting to slow down, and I'm now starting to level back off to the desired altitude. So that is one way that you can decrease in altitude or increase in altitude. You can use the vertical speed. You can do a positive vertical speed to go up and a negative vertical speed to go down. But as you noticed, the plane doesn't really do anything with regards to speed. It just does exactly what you told it to do, go up or down. So now let's say I want to go from 4,000 to 3,000, so I simply click the left outer nod here of altitude to 3,000. And then I'm going to click FLC for flight level change. Notice at the top it says flight level change 106 knots. But I'm not doing anything. I seem to be stuck. I'm not going up. I'm not going down. My speed's staying the same. What could possibly be going on? Well, what's going on is flight level change respects my speed. So if I locked it in at 106 knots, it won't go to 107 knots to go down. So if I want to actually do a flight level change, I'm going to have to decrease my speed here. So you'll hear my throttle go down. And then now I'm using the pitch downward, because as I go down, I'm going to gain speed. So now the plane will try to maintain that 106 knots as I go down and adjust the pitch of the angle until I get to that 3,000, but maintaining the speed. So you can see here, I lowered my throttle down, and you can see that here, I'm 2,100 RPMs. Let's go down a little more. Say go down to 1950. And you notice now it's just lowering my pitch even more so that it can keep that 106 speed while it does my 3,000 here. Once it gets to 3,000, again, it doesn't care. It's going to try to maintain 106, but I'm going to have to increase my throttle here in order to do that. So flight level change will maintain the current speed as you go up or down. So that's very useful if you have some passengers on board and you don't want them to get whiplash. You can do your flight level in a very slow way. It may be a 3-degree pitch, like a glide slope, where vertical speed doesn't care. It's just going to do exactly what you said. If you said go up 500 feet per minute, it's going to do it no matter what the speed is. So those are two features of the Autopilot. The other feature I'm going to show you is called the heading bug. So I'm still heading towards Ottawa. I got 8.1 nautical miles away. Let's say I want to take off. So I'm right now going at a heading of 197. And here is my desired heading of 200. Let's say I want a heading of 230. I use the heading bug and I changed it to 230. There we go. And now I can select the heading option here. And instead of using the GPS, it will just fly the heading that I've just selected here. Now that we have arrived to our heading of 230 degrees, as we set in the Autopilot, we can shift focus from the Autopilot to creating a flight plan. At the bottom right of the primary flight display, we have our flight plan keys. Our Direct To button lets us go directly to a waypoint, and I showed you that earlier when we went to the nearest airport. And now I'll look at the flight plan button. When I click the flight plan button, we have our current waypoint of CYOW and a highlighted empty waypoint box here. So if I want that to turn into a waypoint, I would use the inner knob to start turning it to say CYRP for carp. So C, we use the outer knob here to advance. Outer knob again. Finally, when we get to P and we're happy, we press enter twice, and now we have 2 waypoints. You'll want to make sure that the cursor is highlighted because you won't be able to navigate up or down without it. Using the outer knob, you can actually go ahead and navigate between different waypoints. So let's say I wanted to enter another waypoint between these two. Since adding a waypoint always adds it above the cursor, if I move the cursor to CYRP and I start to enter the next waypoint, it'll put it between these two. So let's enter CYRO now. And enter twice. So now we have our 3 waypoints. Let's say I want to delete a waypoint. I use the outer knob to select it. I can press clear and then enter to delete it. If I want to unhighlight my cursor, I click the middle FMS knob and that will unhighlight it. Clicking it again will highlight it. Let's say I want to go directly to CYRP. I can hit the Direct To button and then enter, and now I'm going directly to that waypoint and it removes all the other waypoints. So these are some basic features of the flight plan menu. I can also click menu and save this and activate a lag and invert the flight plan. I can go to procedures and do approach arrivals and departures, and I'll get more advanced into this in a future video, similar to the GNS 530 video. But for now, that's the basics of creating a flight plan on the G1000. So now that we looked at the primary flight display, we'll do a quick overview of the multifunction display. It's exactly the same as the primary flight display. All the outer knobs and buttons are exactly the same. Our Nav and Comm Frequencies are up there as well. We have our NAS status bar at the top. Really the only difference here is a few different soft keys at the bottom, a movable map that's quite large, and our engine information. So I can use the range over here to zoom in and out of the movable map, and you can see the range here at the bottom, 8 nautical miles. Increasing it goes to 10 and so on. And I can also see that I'm on the nav page and there's 1 page. If I use the outer knob, now I'm on the waypoint screen and I can see all the information about my current selected waypoint, as well as frequencies at the airport and so on. And there's no other pages. Going to the next page, I'm at the nearest screen, and you notice there's 4 sub-pages here. I have the nearest airports, information over here on the runways and so on, and using the inner knob I can go to the sub-pages. So now I have the nearest intersections, the next sub-page, the nearest NDBs, and lastly the nearest VOR. So using the outer knob again, I can go back to the main screen, which is the movable map. That is basically the multifunction display. There's not a lot to it. The only other thing I haven't showed you yet is the audio panel, and there's not much to be said right now about this. You can use the buttons here for your COM 1 and 2 mics. If you click COM 2, it'll merge both of them together. The marker mute here is kind of neat. I haven't seen a whole lot of approaches that use marker beacons, but I did create one video on them, and the marker beacons are essentially a outer, inner, and middle beacon to let you know how close you are to the airport. So this particular G1000 will mute the sound once you arrived at a marker beacon until you get to the next one. Lastly, you have some buttons here for DME, Nav, Nav2, and ADF. This will let you listen to the Morse code indications for those nav aids. And you also have a button here called Display Backup. So let's imagine the primary flight display was to crash and turn completely black. I could click Nav Backup, and it will now merge everything to the other display. And you can now see I have the engine information and everything all in one exact display. So Display Backup will merge those things for you if that's something that you would like to do. So that is the G1000 in a nutshell. I will create a more advanced version in the future. I hope you subscribe to my page and put at the bottom some future videos that you'd like to see me create. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and have a great evening.